Welcome, everyone, to our first Middle East Peace Working Group Symposium comprising an all-woman panel. This program is a joint project of the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposia and the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation of Union Presbyterian Seminary. We hope that you will join us for future programming as we come together to say that peace is possible and necessary now. It is my pleasure and honor to be co-moderating this panel of amazing Israeli and Palestinian women with Lynn Feinerman, my co-moderator, who I will introduce in a moment. Yes, this all-woman panel was not by accident. It was organized for the explicit purpose of providing a woman's perspective, because it is clear that women's voices have not sufficiently been heard, and their influence and empowerment for achieving the goal of a just and sustainable peace cannot be overstated. You will hear today from our panel about their own personal experiences and stories of others' experiences of living in a prolonged conflict and how it affects life on the ground for both Israelis and Palestinians. Because conflict has an effect on everyone involved. Today's symposium will explore these effects and allow us to see where we are now. And with that, I will turn it over to my co-moderator, Lynn Feinerman. Lynn, you're on mute.
Oh. No, actually, I'm not. I'm not on mute.
No, you're not.
Hello? Can you
Yes.
hear me now? Greetings, welcome. Thank you for attending. I'm really thrilled. We are all honored and excited to hear from our distinguished panelists today. This first symposium in a set of 3 from the women's perspective is, as Fatma explained, intended so that you can understand in a personal way what it is to live in the reality on the ground in an extended war of attrition, in a conflict that has been going on for decades. And I just want to re-emphasize, as Fatma said, that we proposed our series of symposia from the women's perspective because we feel that women do not have the voice or the influence that we should in matters of war in particular, and all conflicts. And our vision is often ignored in policy decisions and negotiations about war and conflict, both worldwide and in the Middle East. So women's viewpoints about these issues are different. They can be very different, and they can be very transformative. So we hope with these 3 symposia to find common ground, to vision together, and maybe even to create a bit of a movement of women who want to resolve what's going on in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. So today we focus on the current occupation, as Fatma said, and we talk about what it is like to live with that occupation, the losses, the heartbreaks, the issues. I just wanted to say that we are sorry that Mehreta Baruch Ron, former deputy mayor of Tel Aviv, will not be with us today, but maybe in a future symposium. So first, we'd like to share with you a short music video that we think frames the tensions of living with the conflict. And it's sung by the Rana Choir of Jaffa, which is 16 Muslim, Christian, and Jewish women. Rana Choir aims to express the female voice, to cultivate dialogue, and create a cultural and human bridge. Their repertoire includes folk songs and women's songs in Hebrew, Arabic, and other languages and cultures of the region. So hope you enjoy that. Thank you.
بتنفس حرية ما تقطع عني الهوى لا تزيدها كتير علي أحسن ما نوقع تسمعني وتحكيلي وإذا فكرك عم بتداويني مش هيدا هو الدواء. أنا بتنفس حرية ما تقطع عني الهوا لا تزيدها كتير علي أحسن ما نوقع سوا. صوت الحرية بيبقى أعلى من كل الأصوات مهما توصف ريح الظلم يعطي الليل المسافات. ما فيك تلون هالكون عبعده بذات اللون. ما فيك تلون هالكون عبعده بذات اللون وتبادل نظام الأرض وتغير مجرى الهواء. أنا بتنفس حرية ما تقطع عني الهوا لا تزيدها كتير علي أحسن ما نوقع سوا. أنا بتنفس حرية ما تقطع عني الهوا لا تزيدها كتير علي أحسن ما نوقع سوا.
Okay.
That is amazing.
Amazing is not the word. That is just, it is absolutely, wow, off the charts. Just beautiful. The music, the movement, the words, you know, all of it coming together. So powerful. Thank you, Rana Choir. Hopefully we'll have you on live at some point in the future. So with that, I'm going to move on to have our invocation, which we are very honored to have Rabbi Susan Silverman give us this time. It's my pleasure to introduce her. And as a point of order, before I do that, I'd like to say that we are honored to have Rabbi Silverman as the first woman faith leader to be addressing our first all-women symposium. For subsequent symposia in our 3-part Women's Perspective series, we will ask women faith leaders of other traditions also to provide the invocation. So just to let you know, this is just the first in many that we have that we hope to do, and you know, stay tuned. We've got a lot more coming. So with that, I will introduce Rabbi Silverman. Rabbi Silverman is a leading Reform rabbi in Israel and the world, and a member of Women of the Wall, who challenged the Orthodox chief rabbinate of Israel's chokehold on the holiest place in all of Judaism. That is quite a feat. Thank you, Susan Silverman, Rabbi Silverman, for being here today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Lynn. I'm so honored that you reached out and asked me to be part of this today. And the word that came to mind was that music, dance, full video was majestic. It was just majestic, kind of like lifted our eyes to the mystery and the unknown and our real lived lives within that. And I have chills. I'm really moved by it. I wanted to share a couple of stories very briefly that are meaningful to me in terms of my understanding of peace and relationship and connection. And they're from Jewish tradition, from Jewish voices. That's where I orient myself in the world. And the first one is the story of the Exodus from Egypt, right? We're familiar with the story. And I feel that as a Jew in Israel, often Jews here, we identify very strongly with the Israelites in that story. I think that's a problem. I think, yes, we should identify with the Israelites, but we should all learn that we are all of the characters. That here in Israel, we are also Pharaoh. And we are also the Egyptians, and we are also the midwives, and we're also the Israelites. That we encompass all of those characters. We're not just one. You know, maybe for centuries we may have been, but here now we're not. We've all those characteristics within us. It's up to us who we are going to emulate and what character we're going to strengthen in this country. And I think that this is something for everybody to think about in terms of the stories and metaphors that orient us. Is how do we see each of the characters, the good and the evil, within us? Because only once that we can acknowledge that lives within us, can we make that kind of progress with each other. And so my blessing to us is that we all can see within ourselves what's not so beautiful and what's not so productive and engaging with the other, and that we can use that to grow and to see each other with the kind of empathy that we want for ourselves in terms of all of our own failures. And I think that's important in terms of not being hardened, not seeing ourselves as a certain way, and then that's who we must be, or we are, everyone else is that way. And I think that there's no one I know who captures that more powerfully than Yehuda Amichai in a poem called "The Place Where We Are Right." And I would like to conclude by sharing that poem with you. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow. And a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. Thank you.
Fatma, I'm going to go on and introduce you so that I cannot hear you. You're muted, dear.
Oh, I am so sorry. I was, let me start all over again. You can tell this is the first time we're doing this. So I just wanted to thank Rabbi Susan again. Those words were so powerful, and I couldn't have said them better myself. So thank you. And my camera went out. So there we are. Thank you again, Rabbi Susan. With that, I am going to set our ground rules. So as I said, there will be two of us moderating the program today. And just so you know who we are, we're going to introduce each other to you, our esteemed audience, in a moment. But first, I'd like to ask you to observe some simple ground rules. As you can see, we have a chat feature as part of our program, and we ask that you use it to introduce yourselves and to make comments only relevant to the symposium. In doing so, we ask that you use decorum and respect to guide your comments and suggestions to the speakers, other members of the audience, and the moderators. So the Israeli-Palestinian, as you can see from the banner, the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium Series Facebook page is also now welcoming comments on the symposium. So with that, I will begin by introducing Lynn Feinerman, my co-moderator for today's event. Lynn Feinerman is a lifelong activist for peace with justice, beginning with her opposition to the Vietnam War. Lynn lived in Israel-Palestine to produce a movie about peacemakers there titled If You Make It Possible. She directed the Hebron Community Project to teach peace-building techniques and nonviolent resistance to the Palestinian citizens of Hebron and to Israeli settlers in nearby Kiryat Arba. She is the producer for Peace Rising Radio, an international program providing visionary women in leadership for all the critical issues. So with that, now it's Lynn's turn to introduce me.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Fatima. I just want to make a correction. It is Women Rising Radio, not Peace Rising Radio, and it focuses on women worldwide who are visionaries in leadership for all the critical issues of today. Now I will introduce Fatima. Fatima is an international business and strategic planning consultant, a visionary community activist and advocate focusing on interfaith engagement, conflict management, and women's empowerment. Her experience in empowering women began as an advocate to prevent violence against women, which she pursued during her college years and continued through her career in leadership roles with the federal government, where she supported women-owned enterprises locally and internationally. Fatima was economic co-chair for the U.S. network for the UN Fourth World Conference on Women and has trained women in entrepreneurship in emerging country economies. Fatima is a member of numerous interfaith boards, including Center for Pluralism and also vice president of the Jewish Islamic Dialogue Society. She co-leads and co-founded the Arlington chapter of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, which is a national Jewish Muslim women's peace-building organization in the USA.
And abroad, I will add, we now have a Berlin chapter. Sorry, I'm still not used to this technology, so forgive my shortcomings on that end. So with that, I am going to introduce, we're finally getting to the program, folks. I'm finally going to introduce our first speaker, Robbie Damelin, who really does not require an introduction. And at her request, I have I have made much shorter than I had intended. I will just say that Robbie is the Israeli spokesperson and member of the Parents Circle Families Forum, a group of 600 Israeli and Palestinian families who have lost close family members to the conflict and who work together for reconciliation and a just resolution to the conflict. There's so much more to be said about Robbie, but at her request, I am going to allow her to fill in the rest. So the floor is all yours, Robbie.
So thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. And I think I can represent women in Israel as a mother. I want to talk about mothers and what it's like to live in a country that is constantly in turmoil and constantly faced with so much violence, and how it affects your daily life and how children grow up. And thinking of the recent war, I keep thinking of all the children, both in Gaza and in Sderot and in Ashkelon, and what are these children going to grow up to be? How much hatred will there be without any connection? They will never know each other unless we all make a major effort. It is so sad to think of the 67 families who lost children during this recent war. You know, it's not the people who died, it's the people who left behind. And what are we doing? What are we doing to support them? What are we doing, in fact, now with COVID all over the world? How are we supporting all of these thousands and thousands of families who've lost members to COVID? My own personal experience of being a woman is I think that I am a human being. I'm not interested so much in gender. I'm interested in making change. And I was born in South Africa, and when I came to Israel in 1967, I thought I was coming to save Israel in the war, and ended up working in a chicken house. I had no intention of actually staying here, but that's how the world works. And I got married and had 2 children, David and Iran. And when the army came to tell me that David, my son, had been killed by a Palestinian sniper, it appears that one of the first things that I said is, you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. And I will say at this point that one Palestinian killed my son, not the whole Palestinian nation. I knew almost at once that I wanted to do something that would prevent other mothers, particularly mothers. I'm interested in mothers. I worked with the Black mothers in America, both of police, mothers of policemen who died, and mothers also from the Black mothers. And it's quite incredible because there's absolutely no need for any bridge. It just all happens automatically that we share the same pain. And so my life, I found myself after 2 months after David was killed, talking at a huge rally to get out of the occupied territories. I knew instinctively then that we would have to have a partner if we wanted to find a way to end the violence, and the partner would have to be the Palestinians. I didn't know how this was all going to happen. I didn't know what I was going to be doing. But a man came to see me called Itzhak Frankenthal, and he invited me to go to a seminar in East Jerusalem with other bereaved families. And I remember sitting around a table and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers who'd lost children and thinking to myself, wow, we share the same pain. If we stood over a grave and the tears came out, they would be the same color. And if we could talk on a stage together in one voice, would we not be an example to everybody else? Because who is the least likely people to stand on a stage and talk about reconciliation and talk about nonviolence? And so I started to travel all over the world, and I thought I was terribly important. I spoke in the House of Congress and in the House of Lords and in hip-hop concerts, always with a Palestinian partner. And everywhere I went, it was incredible to understand how much this message is not local. This is a message for everybody, everywhere, that it is possible to have transformation, to change. One night I came home and there was a knock on my door, and I opened the door and there were 3 soldiers standing there. If you would be Israeli, you would understand that 3 soldiers can only mean one thing. So I slammed the door in their face. And they kept knocking and knocking and knocking. And eventually I opened the door and they said, we came to tell you that we caught the man who killed David. Now that's when everything became impossible. Because it's so easy, you know, this word peace strips off everybody's tongue so easily. You can talk about reconciliation, talk about love, you can read bad poetry, but do you actually mean it? This is the question. And it took me 3 months of really soul searching to see if there was any integrity in the work that I would be doing if I didn't walk the talk. Because now there was a face, before there was nobody. And so it took me at least 3 months to write a letter to the family of Fida. That's the name of the man who killed David. And 2 Palestinians from our group took the letter to the family, who were very shocked. They didn't expect to get a letter from the mother of somebody, somebody that their son had killed. And I told them all about David, who was a student at Tel Aviv University, and he was studying for his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was part of the peace movement, and he was part of the student uprising. And here we go. Do we know who that person behind the gun, and what kind of quandary did they face when they had to go to serve in occupied territories? And so it was extraordinary, because he came to visit me just before he was called to go to the reserves. And he said, I don't know what to do. If I don't go, what will happen to my students? He was teaching philosophy to kids who were going to be inducted into the army. And if I don't go, what will happen to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And if I do go, I will treat people with dignity. And so will all my soldiers. So you see, do we know who that person is behind the gun? I think not. I was filled with a sense of dread, and I didn't want him to go at all. And I understood what he was saying 3 years after he was killed, when I met a Palestinian sitting in the audience at the American embassy, And I knew he wanted to say something. And he came to me and he said, I just want to tell you that the day before your son was killed, I drove through that checkpoint. And there was this very tall young man that came to my car and said, I must see your papers, it's my duty. And they got into a conversation. And then he said, the next day when I heard that your son was killed, I was so sorry. You see, that is the essence of all the work that we do in the parent circle. It's recognizing the humanity in the other. In the letter, I also wrote to the family that I wanted to meet them. We owed that to our children and grandchildren. I am not the most patient character in the Middle East, as you may well find out, and expected to get a letter back from the sniper the next day. Of course, it took 3 years to get a very nasty letter which came over a website in which Thaya said that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. But I understood from his family that when he was a very little boy, he saw his uncle violently killed by the Israeli army, and he lost 2 further uncles in the second uprising. I think he went on a path of revenge. When I got that letter, that was the time to give up being a victim. You know, people try to use the word survivor now, but just this last week, I suddenly thought, I don't like the word survivor. I would rather be a victor. I'm not a victim. And I went to South Africa and we made a film about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we met perpetrators and victims who had given evidence. And I also was investigating what I meant when I said, I forgive you. And I went to visit a woman, a South African white woman, who actually had lost her daughter. She was killed by the black military wing of the African National Congress. And she'd gone to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and said to the people who killed her daughter, I forgive you. And what did she mean? I mean, what did she mean when she said, I forgive you? And I went to meet her and I asked for her definition. And she said, forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge. And then I met the man who actually sent the people to kill her daughter. And he said, by her forgiving me, she has released me from the prison of my inhumanity. Think about that, is the most beautiful sentence that I can think of. When I came back, I decided it's time to meet Thaya. And I went to Tzipi Livni, who was then the Minister of Justice, and I got permission and I asked for Bassam Aramin to be the go-between. I don't talk so much about mediators because the word mediator usually for me means some kind of compromise. And I love Bassam, who's a member of the Parent Circle and who lost his daughter and spent 7 years in jail and did a master's degree at Bradford University. How much more do you have to show the world to show that you're human? And the two of us have traveled all over, and I wanted him because he understood the culture. He understood what it is to be in jail. He understood the language. So we got permission for that as well, which was quite stunning. And then, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, for some, we seem to have a lot of elections in Israel, you may have noticed. So there were 2 ministers of justice, each one worse than the next, and they had no intention of letting me in. In the present government, I was sent a letter to Omer Bar-Lev, who's the Minister of Police now, and he sent me to the head of the police, who then said that I could not get into the jail because the only way I could do that is if Thaya will ask permission to see me. So of course they thought they could just fob me off, you know, and I would go away, but I'm like one of these ticks that attaches itself to your neck and you can't get rid of me. And I called his lawyer, Thaya's lawyer, and he said he would try to get him to make a request for me to see Thaya. I need to do this as a completion. I'm not looking for repentance. I'm not looking for anything. I am absolutely free in myself. I am not a victim. I wanted to talk about how the occupation affects the Palestinian women in our group and how what happens. I don't know how much time I've got, and I can talk till tomorrow morning. Just raise your hand if I've done the 7 minutes that you said. Yeah.
About 3 more minutes.
Okay.
I'm loving this, but I know that we have other people that want to speak too. So thank you, Robbie.
Actually, what happened is that some of the Palestinians are actually very pleased to be able to talk on Zoom. Think about it, as much as we dislike this manner of speaking, they don't have to ask permission from anybody to come to Israel. There's no permits needed to talk on Zoom. There's no borders. But a woman that lives in Palestine, we have to understand what the occupation means, what it is when you don't have freedom of movement. Freedom of movement is a basic human right. We have a member on the panel who wasn't sure if she could get here because she had to go through a checkpoint. What kind of indignity is caused by somebody having to stand at a checkpoint and by an 18-year-old kid who doesn't even know, when we go into schools to talk to them, he doesn't even know where the West Bank is. He thinks he's going to be a huge hero. And he stands at a checkpoint and he now has permission to act out all of his power. And why do we think that what happens there will not affect the population of Israel, will not affect the way that we behave? How much more physical violence do we have here? What is the reaction from this whole occupation? You cannot continue to occupy for so many years and not imagine that it will affect your moral fiber. There's more physical violence. There's more violence in schools. There's more violence in general. And you don't win wars to bring peace. There's no peace from a war. We have to stop using this as an excuse. We have to get to the politicians and women. This is the role of women now. I can tell you that I travel a lot in the West Bank. Sorry, I haven't got corona. In the meantime, if you go to the West Bank, and I do this a lot, you go into homes of women, and in the beginning, they are quite suspicious of who you are. And when you share your story and when they discover your humanity, there's a complete change, and they begin to want to be part of the parent circle. And the extraordinary thing is, why? I mean, the thing is that these people have never, ever met an Israeli out of uniform or who isn't a settler. So why would they think I'm any different? And this whole wall of not knowing each other is what creates the hatred, which creates fear, which creates violence. And let us look at what we can do for kids. Kids who live in this country, kids who live in Gaza, and kids who live in the West Bank. It didn't happen by chance, the burning of cars outside my house here in Jaffa. It wasn't not to be expected. It wasn't not to be expected that settlers would take it upon themselves to come and create violence here as well. These children are all abused. I know that it sounds strange to say that settler children are abused, but I think they are, because every generation becomes a bigger abuser than the one before. And that's very scary for me. So there is so much work to be done, but I think the woman's voice is that compassion and that ability to listen to somebody you don't agree with empathy might make this change. And even though I'm an endangered species, I'm not giving up. Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. That was, there's just so much there to unpack. And I think I'm going to leave it to the end to get into that, but incredibly powerful words. It's about humanity, first and foremost, listening, compassion. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn to introduce Fida, who is our next speaker.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to take a few seconds for us to absorb a bit of what Robbie has said and to just sit with a little bit. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now introduce our next panelist, who is Fida Naratabuni, and Fida is a Palestinian activist based in Nazareth, Israel. Fida is the director of Shatil in nearby Haifa. And Shatil is a project of the New Israel Fund, which empowers democracy, tolerance, environment and sustainability, gender rights, human rights, and youth education. So welcome and blessings to you for joining us, Fida.
Hi, good evening and good morning, everybody. Actually, after Ruby, I don't know if there's anything that we can say with all the, and it's not the first time for me being with Ruby in a panel or any group or any discussion, but this is the most important voice, I think, the pain that become to be activist for human, for freedom and human being rights. But I will try to take ourselves. When you asked me to talk in this panel, I just told you, Nazareth is, I'm a Palestinian who live in Nazareth, and there is less than 20% of the population in Israel are Palestinian with the Israeli ID. My family is in the West Bank, and part of my family is in South Lebanon. And thank you for Facebook for the last 15 years that we can find each other, and we have the whole group of the family in Facebook, but we never can meet, not in Israel, not in the West Bank, all of us, and not in Lebanon, because part of us cannot move from place to place. But maybe in Jordan, sometime we will meet all of us. And this is part of the life of each Palestinian family in all over the world. I born in 2000 in 1976, which is directly after the first Land Day, and I get the Fida. Fida is a very Palestinian name, and I really like the name. I came from a very, very political active family, and this has given me the privilege to be not afraid, part of minority that not afraid and active and say and in a very high voice everything that I think and activist. And it's really not something that all the minority that live under a very racism policy from Israel. We have in the last years the national law, which means if you are Jewish, you are better than other people here in Israel, which mean and we have the racism in all over the place. Sometimes it's in a policy, sometimes it's the people who choose you. I can say about myself, my Hebrew is very good, and when I talk in university or in any meeting in Hebrew, nobody can know that I'm a Palestinian, but when they say my ID or my name, they can say directly that I'm a Palestinian, and directly the way that they talk to me change. And it's really small things in front of the occupation and the way that Palestinians live under the occupation in the West Bank or Gaza, but it's still, I see it part of the occupation are entered to Israel, and it's part of our life here. Racism, violence, checkpoint. We have checkpoint in May here in one of the village in the north, inside Israel, checkpoint in front of a Palestinian village in the north. And actually, the last May violence that happened and all what happened in Sheikh Jarrah I think it was very, very high a point that we learn about our youth. I think our youth, the Palestinian youth in general, and the Palestinian youth inside Israel is less afraid from us. They were in the street, and believe me, I'm raising two youth daughter, and it's really hard for me as a feminist to raise two feminist activists, two daughters that it was all the days on the street in demonstration against destroys homes in Sheikh Jarrah, and against all what happened in Al-Aqsa or Gaza or Jenin. Because what's happened in these days, that youth don't need us to have contact, don't need the news, don't need the NGOs, don't need the policy and the parties. They have their relation and contact directly by Instagram. Even they don't use Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And it was amazing. And I'm talking about my home, for example, that we talk about politics all the time, but still in that days, in May 2021, things are different. I think it's one of the points for us, for people who want to build a shared society in Israel and end the occupation and bring peace and freedom for everybody. It was a point that the youth told us, it's enough. We are part of the Palestinian nationality, and this is something that we know and we talk about, but they say it in a very, very high voice for everybody. And we cannot just talk in Israel about economical right, and we are part of the Palestinian nationality. So now, more and more youth talking about the occupation, and it's important. It's important because from October 2000, what happened here inside Israel, a citizen of Israel killed by the police because there was a demonstration against what's happening in Jenin and Al-Aqsa. And people are afraid. From that moment, people are afraid. And the government in Israel give us the opportunity to build us as a persons in separate and not as a collective, as a part of the Palestinian nationality. And in May 2021, we hear in a very high voice, when I talk about we as a political active, as a feminist activist, as a part of the NGOs in Israel, we understand this is a crisis, but this crisis is opportunity for us to bring back the main problem and the main issue that we should all active against is the occupation, because it is the basic for everything, for all the racism inside Israel. So my point is very unique. I'm part of the Palestinian nationality, but I'm part of Israel, which means at some time nobody like me and nobody see me part of them, but sometimes everybody see me as a bridge or the one that can take more part of ending this conflict and ending the occupation. I see myself as a Palestinian first of all, as a human being, as a feminist who are active for justice, which means sometime I will be active with Ethiopian Jewish youth in Israel for their right to make a change, because I see the relation, we see the religion between that problem and between the occupation. Because everybody who believes in justice, we cannot separate the justice. We cannot talk about justice as a feminist. Just for us, we need human rights and equal opportunity for men and women. No. Sometimes as a woman, I can be a very privileged, and I like that what you say, Ruby. It's our activist as a human being who want justice and freedom and fight against racism for everybody. So, and seeing it in a very holistic way, this is the only way that we can make a change, a real deep change here. But it should start from some point. And the first point is ending the occupation. I don't know if there any other place in all over the world that more than 15 years people don't have any freedom to move from place to place. If there any place in all over the world that people can lose their home and because settlement want to build and want to control their land. And we talk about Area C, which means this area is, if we will think about ending the occupation, and if still anybody think about Palestinian country, what's happening now, all the settlement that they build, and when you talk about settlement, it's not just building the settlement, it's all the structures to help them to work. It's all the street, they control more and more land to build a street and to build a good infrastructure for the settlement to have a good life. And this take us far away from the solution, Palestinian country. Palestinian country, it's the minimum that we can start. And then, so if we want to talk about democracy in Israel, it should be from the sea until to the Mahayam LaYarden, from the sea to the river. It cannot be part just in Tel Aviv democracy, and in Nazareth or Jenin or Nablus or Gaza, people live under any kind of racism or any kind of occupation. The last thing that I want to say, still I think like everything happened and changing all over the world, women start this change. And I believe that we will start it and we will bring the peace and the democracy and equal right for everybody. We can do it. We only don't have the ego, and we can do it, and we will do it. I'm for sure. I still believe in this, and I hope that I will never stop believing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fida. That was so beautiful. And I really, I'd like just for us to take a minute of just silence to absorb what Fida has said to us as well. And take it away, Fatma.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, I had the honor of introducing Gabby Lasky, who was going to be our next speaker, but I think Gabby is on the road. She's a member of the Knesset, so she is a very busy lady. She is on the road, and I believe she will be able to join us in a few minutes. So while we are waiting for her to connect, I think she's having some technical difficulties. I would like to introduce, I will ask Lynn to introduce Nafisa Atala, who is our one of the four speakers that we have today, and Gabi will likely join us after Nafisa.
Okie dokie. I am honored and excited to introduce Nafisa Badarin, who is a Palestinian living in occupied East Jerusalem. She graduated from Al-Quds Open University and is now working as an administrative assistant for the regional director, the regional manager of the university under the Palestinian Authority. Nafisa is on the board of Reiki for Peace and also on the board of Hukukana in Jerusalem. So thank you very, very much for joining us, Nafisa. We know the hardships that you have to bridge to get to be with us.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Well, yeah, it's very hard to join this kind of Zoom because of the lack of the internet and the checkpoints, all these things. I have to get into my house. So anyway, I'm Palestinian. I live in an area called Ras Khamis. It's close to a Shofat refugees camp, and I grew up in this area. I went to the elementary school, which belonged to the UN, and then I graduated from the a, a governmental school, and then from the Palestinian Al-Quds Open University with baccalaureate degree in business. And now I'm living this life close to this camp, and unfortunately each day I have this checkpoint to cross the checkpoint to go to my work, and and even though we do have the Israelis IDs, and even though we paid all the taxes, all the water, sewages, everything, which it's belong to the Jerusalem municipality, but we don't have any services around us. So we are like in the marginalizing area, which hopefully like the organization which called Hukukuna, it was established before 3 years when the mayor election started. So we encouraged Arab Palestinian to join this election, because we have the right in Jerusalem to have somebody to represent us. But unfortunately he quit, and this organization, it's there still, but still we are working there. This is first where I live. The thing is, it's very, as a Palestinian woman who lived close to this camp, and it's becoming very crowded camp because of the lack of issuing building license from the Israeli government. So the whole Palestinian who holds the Israeli IDs, whose they are residents, they are not citizen. We have a very weird status here. We're different than the other Palestinian who live in West Bank, because the Palestinian who live in West Bank, they do have nationality, they do have ID for their Palestinian government or authority, and they do have passports, but we don't have anything, like we don't have nationality IDs or passport citizenship. We have only the travel document. This travel document, some countries they don't recognize it. And the other thing is, the as a woman, look, we have lots of difficulties and differences. First of all, the woman, the occupation, which made this obstacles, that we couldn't build any houses outside like the camp, because of the lack of the issuing the license. And the second thing is the religion and the traditional, that mix it between the people, mix it between the religion and the traditional, and the men society around us. So all these things, it's influences the woman, and influences the society. For me, like when I saw this like society in my early, like beginning, when I was like in my 20s, I went through the checkpoints, and the checkpoint was clashes there, and I was in the middle actually. Unfortunately, I was in that moment. The whole my life came to me. How could I grow up in this kind of society and a kind of, let's say, violence. In all my life, I raised my life, I raised myself, I did lots of things for myself in order to be like to be a feminine woman, and to end this, like I was thinking, what the hell I'm doing here? If I go on by my walking, the children or the youth people who throw stones to the soldiers, they will consider me as soldiers, and they will throw stones, and I think one of the stones will hit me. And if I ran away from the soldiers towards the children or the men who throw stones, the soldiers will consider me as these men. So it's the whole all my life came to me in front of my eyes, and afterwards, thanks God, I continued my way with very courageous, and I couldn't believe that I crossed the whole, even the whole, let's say, the whole war. And after that, I made a decision in my life that I will not bring any children to this life, because I don't want to raise my child in this violence, and at the end, after that, somebody will come to kill him or to kill her. And I can't handle it at all. This is the most influences things happens in my life. And the other thing, each day, these days, it's very difficult for us from the occupation, because also, like, uh, the drugs in the camp, like before 4 days, there's two men, a young man who's in his age 18, killed in the middle of the day by Palestinian because of the drugs. We have lots of drugs dealers. We have drugs addiction to drugs. The boys and the girls there, and we have lots of harassment. We have lots of rapping. Because of we don't have privacy. The people in the camp, they are there's plenty of people, and the buildings is very close to each other, and there's no privacy for women. So that's something, and their relative also. I afterwards, like when I saw all these things, I become like aware of myself, and I was looking to myself deep, 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 and then I made a decision that this is violence, couldn't do anything. I want I want to be in peace. I want to live as other women in this world, and we want like to have inner peace, and then we can do the peace with our neighbors. In my, like, I was I am very activist, peace activist. Like I'm there since 20 years with lots of organization. One of the organization which I was the coordinator for a project, which give me your hand for next step, with the coordinator with the Croatian government, which it was for the youth people, for the making to have to know their experience by peace, and to make it happen, and to take a lesson from their experience about their work. And the thing is, it gave me lots of experience with dealing with the other side, and the Israelis actually. And in my when I was young, I was thinking that the whole Israelis was soldiers. I never had before, like I attended these lectures and conferences which I did. I never thought that the Israeli are regular people, and they are human, and I can love them, and they could be my friends, blah blah. But now afterwards I become like, I have many friends there, and I want peace. I want to have my our own movement for women, Palestinian women, who taking care of women, taking care of inner peace for women, and then we could take the whole issues around us and our surrounded to be more stable and grounded in our houses, in our country, and all over the world. So I'm very like, I'm very with women. I'm very like, I'm feminine actually, and I feminist, and the thing is, I'm looking forward to make our own movement, and to spread all over Palestine for women only, without like interfere any political issues, because we need ourselves first, and then we can do the whole piece around us. I went through lots of things which, in my daily life, I am going through a very bad experience by the checkpoint when I drive. I was in the checkpoint. My feet on the gas, on the gas or in the brake, and my heart beeping. If there is any soldier will cross the street in front of my car and consider me as terrorist or something, if I made something if I made any mistake with pushing gasoline instead of pushing the brakes. So it's each day I have these feelings. So I am very like, it's hurtful, it's very hurtful feelings, and I wish I can change it, but it's still like, I feel, even sometimes I feel sorry for the soldiers in the checkpoint, because they are so young, so sweet sometimes, and this is like, it's not, I don't know what is it, application, is it their life or whatever, but still it's very important for me uh, to end the occupation, and it's very important for me to have our own movement, our own uh, peace, to be peace in inner peace first, as I said. And I wish the whole Palestinian woman will have the awarenesses of themselves and what is happening around them, and to be more educated and more cultural, and to spread the the soul of peace, and yes, I think now, after that all, after my suffering actually, I never forget how the soldiers in the middle of the night, they came into my house, and they knocked the door. They didn't knock it actually, they hit the door, and I was there wasn't nobody in the house except me. I was screaming, like I said, nobody in the house, how could you get into the house? And he said, open the door, and I did open it, but it was scaring. I think I will. That day, I think it will happen for me, heart attack or something from them, because they are very special soldiers. They went, and the IDF. It's very. They put them uh, as much as scary as they want, to let the people be more scared. So it's terrible. It's I don't want that anymore, and I faced each day the clashes between the people and the soldiers. And once a young man hit my car, the glasses of my car with the rock, which it was like I was like I didn't know what to do, but I pushed the gasoline. I went by my car. I didn't know what happened to that man. And it was very it's unbelievable. So all these things happen. Palestinian holds Israeli IDs, and their obligation to protect me, not to kill, not to hit, not to do anything, because they are the one who like the resolution, the UN resolution said that the occupation has to protect the people who's under the occupation. So I don't see anything from that. We the opposite. So I'm sorry about, like, it's been a long time I'm talking, but I have lots of story which it's like make me cry from them, because it's there. I think it's a trauma for me, but thanks God, still I have that hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and I want peace. Really, it's very complicated feelings, and I'm struggling inside myself, but still, after all, even I face today, like when I get in, there's lots of traffic because somebody who, like, I don't know what they did, but still I am Palestinian woman and want peace. And I need partners, because until now, who's I met from the other side, they are so nice. I love them so much. But I need somebody to influence their government. The government is awful. I know several election happened, but still it's awful. We can't do anything with that. The international, maybe they do have their own influences for this.
Nafisa, I could listen to you for another hour, but I'm just mindful that we have a limited amount of time left, and we want to allow some time for questions and answers. So that was just immensely moving.
I would like to ask
just
that.
So incredibly articulate, and I like what you were saying about, it's a reminder of our common humanity, and this conflict is a situation that really doesn't make sense for anyone. We are still waiting for Gabby Lasky to join us. She apparently is still having difficulties, so I think I'm just going to move the conversation into the Q&A.
Fatma, can we just have a moment of just silence to absorb what
absolutely
what Nafisa has said to us? It's
absolutely yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Nafisa. It was really moving and very important for us to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I think we're going to move the program into the Q&A, and it is the audience has the floor. Ask away. You've got about 20 minutes. Sorry, we had some incredibly moving presentations, and I thought it was important that we hear them in their entirety. So, who wants to ask the first question?
I would like to make a comment. It may be a bit premature, but in each of your presentations, I sensed a knowledge of the long-term nature of this conflict and the long-term damage that it's done to so many. And I just wanted to offer a bit of perspective. The conflict appears to have been going on in earnest, shall we say, since 1929, since the Balfour Declaration and the attack on Hebron in 1929. But previous to 1929, in Hebron, I know a bit about Hebron because I worked there and I worked on things there with the Hebron Community Project. Previous to 1929, for 600 years, there was peace between Jews, Christians, and Muslims in Hebron. And things were so harmonious that it is recorded in history that Jewish and Christian and Muslim women would nurse each other's babies. And I would just like to say that because it will give us a sense of the breadth and the length of history, of herstory, shall we say, and the manner in which we can look at this as very painful, but perhaps not so long-lived as we might imagine. People say, "Oh, nobody can get along there. You know, they're all at each other's throats. It's always been like that all throughout history." No, actually, not the truth, and particularly not the truth among women. So I just wanted to say that, as a commentary.
Can I say something? Because it's important for me. It is not a problem between religion here in Israel. It is the Palestinian don't have any right, any freedom, any basic right for country, for move from place to place, for getting health help, as the basic things for human right, for freedom that should happen in all over the world. So, and it's, take it as a part of problem between religion. For me, it's hard to see it in that way, because I'm Palestinian. I'm not religion, and I see part of people here that don't get their freedom, and I see injustice for people, and sometimes it's injustice. The basic of this, the nationality, but sometimes there is injustice in our area because of class, because of gender, because of area that you live in, and I think as a woman, we should find and see how we work and build our power to make the change. And the power is sometimes to play in the political area, but still in our way, in our very unique way, that we are not behave like political men behave, but still we should use how to build a power in our area and all over the world. This is it's important for me to say it after you say that there is people here that don't get the same rights and the same opportunities and the same basic right. There is no water and no electricity in part of the Palestinian villages in Israel, actually, and in the West Bank. In the south of Israel, there is hundreds of people and youth and children and women that don't have electricity and water in their home. This is, we talk about 2021. So, sorry. And if there is no question, I can continue to talk about it.
No reason to be sorry. I am I think this level of candor is is called for and is certainly very, very welcome. And I'm sorry I think Lynn also wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Fatima. Yeah, I agree with you totally, Fida. The reason that I referred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians is that that was the potential impetus for conflict during those 600 years. And the secular activists like yourself
It's a
point out.
conflict for power and control others. This is the conflict.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, regardless of whether it's religious or secular, and thank you for that. Anyone else want to respond?
I just wanted to jump in since I've been perusing the questions and I don't see any that are jumping out at me. So I just wanted to comment on what Lynn said, which I thought was so incredibly powerful and is something to really stop and consider. And, you know, I think we talked about it, but it's the fact that it's really not a religious conflict, and to really, you know, understand that these three religions coexisted very peacefully for long periods of time. And, you know, I think what's a shame is that much of this has, you know, much of the conflict has been history, but maybe not enough her story. So maybe we should stop to consider that and see how we might change things in that context.
I think it's very important to point out, by the way, sorry I'm interrupting, but I think that how we see our history is a very important part of looking for a peaceful solution. Within the Parent Circle, we run a project. It's a parallel narrative project. And it started because the Palestinians and the Israelis in our own group certainly had a sympathy for each other because they shared the same pain. But that doesn't mean that they agreed with each other's national narrative, and in some cases, not even the personal narrative. And so we wanted to do something, and I'm telling you this because I think it's also terribly important for the rest of the world to listen, because it's something that can be adapted into so many polarized countries. So what we did is 140 of us, Palestinians and Israelis, from the group, initially decided that we really wanted to get to the point of trust, which changed the whole attitude. And what happened is that whatever happens in Israel and Palestine, we continue to work. Throughout this whole war and the war before, we met, we had a tent, we had visual. So what it is to take people and to understand how they see their history. So we talk about 1948. So if we take 1948 for Israel, State of Israel, for the Palestinians, the Nakba. It's all the wars that have every milestone in our history can be interpreted by a Palestinian or an Israeli. And the point is, at the end, if you take two professors, an Israeli and a Palestinian, and you put them in the same room and you ask them what happened in 1948, 67, 73, the uprisings, all of our milestones in history, you will discover that it doesn't matter if you don't agree, but if you will be listening with empathy and you will understand how the other person sees their history, this is the beginning of a road towards some kind of compromise. Because the fact is, we don't know each other. We don't know our history. And we don't really, if you would see what it is to go with 140 people, 70 Palestinians to Yad Vashem, to the Holocaust Museum, it's not about comparison for suffering. It's about understanding who these Jews are that have throughout history been persecuted and who walk around with a fear which is in their DNA. It's so strange to understand that. It's not comparing suffering, because we also go to a village which existed before 1948 and is now Israel, a Palestinian village. And we can recognize by taking people from our group there
But Robbie, you agree with me that Palestinians know the Israeli Jewish narrative more than the Jewish know the Palestinian narrative, and so this is part of the problem in our system.
Yes.
Yes.
I agree with you. And
if
so
I could just step in real quickly and
I would add,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because it's very important, especially after what Fida said, is to go to a Palestinian village and to look at what existed before 1948 and to understand that loss and why is a Palestinian woman walking around with a key to a door that's never going to be opened. And so when you understand that, you create empathy.
So important. The empathy part is what you mentioned, Robbie. The empathy part is so important. It's about approaching the situation with an open heart. It's approaching the situation with good intentions and assuming that everyone has good intentions. They may not always have them, but that is the way we all have to. I think if we're going to move forward in the situation, that's the way we have to start. There is a question, I believe Victor Friedman had a question. Fida spoke of women's other way of working. Could she or other members of the panel speak more specifically about that? And could you illustrate it? Mindful of the fact that we are running out of time, this could go on for much longer, but Fida, could you address that, please?
I will do it very quickly, but I believe I believe in freedom and justice for everybody. So I cannot be an activist as a feminist in Israel against any kind of racism and not see the racism and the occupation from the other side. And it starts from this, see things in a very holistic way. And it's not just being, we as a woman use our emotion, the shot, and it's important, and this is our very unique way to continue use and talk with emotion and hear and empathy, like Ruby said. But we should find the way how we can build our power as a woman who believe, all of the women who believe in the same way, and make a change now in the system in Israel, and making change in all over the world. I cannot. It's really hard for me to see how the world see what's happened to Palestinian and still quiet and see the victim, the same, children killed in Gaza by attacked, and there is. It's not in the same level. There is power, people who use power and violence against people who are under the occupation now, and it's not the same. It's not bringing both sides to end the solution. It's to see the power of one side against other side. And as a very active peace activist inside Israel, I think this is my role, to bring the Palestinian voice to the Jewish side and to bring the Jewish side voice to the Palestinian side, to talk about Ruby as a partners. When I talk with Palestinian, when they say nobody from the Jewish can hear us. No, there is Jewish and there is woman and there is human being like us. The situation brings us. So I will stop here, but
okay,
we cannot use the hope that things can change.
Fida, I love the language of the partnership and the bridge and everything. That is definitely where we need to be. I just want to ask one question that Dr. Rodney Sadler had, which is, and this, I think this is going to have to be our last question, and it doesn't appear that Gabi is going to be able to join us today, regrettably, but hopefully we will have her on a future panel. So Dr. Rodney Sadler's question is there something that women, and I think this is very relevant, is there something that women bring to this discussion that men seem to overlook? I noticed the appeal to motherhood, not seeking motherhood. What makes a woman's perspective distinctly different and necessary at this time?
This is a very interesting question, because I look at the women's group. We have within the parent circle a women's group, It started off basically because in the beginning, all the women sat outside, the Palestinian women, and the Palestinian men came into the room to discuss what the parent circle should be doing. And that was not exactly my cup of tea. And so we started a women's group within the parent circle, and it's a lot about education, about how women who haven't had the opportunities, I could tell you stories about powerful women today who are doing the most extraordinary work. You kept asking about Bushra. Her story is so incredible because today, coming from, she would kill a soldier who killed her son if she meets him after 100 years, to the person who runs dialogue groups, parallel narrative groups, who's traveled with me all over the world. So it's all about education. It's about taking the women's group who've been working now for 2 years on understanding and creating their own projects. It's about giving them that opportunity. It's about, one of the groups are talking to Orthodox Jewish women, which is quite incredible because there is a space now after Corona to be involved with certain communities. And we can't allow the extremists to get into that space. It's a very difficult task, but women, I think women have a better sense of compassion. And I'm not saying that men do not feel pain when they lose a child. In fact, many men commit suicide on graves after they lose their children. But you cannot argue with the fact that there's something about the mother educating her kids from all points of view. And so we have to train many women to recognize the possibility for change. And that's everything that we're doing. And it's so rewarding. People ask me about how can I go on like this forever? But I can, because when I recognize the possibility for transformation, and when I can see that I've been a part of somebody's life to allow them to give up on hatred and anger, what a privilege that is. How grateful I am for being a part of that. There's so much to be said about this whole subject. It's not like in a small Zoom and gloom. It's something that's so deep and something that needs so much work. And I wish more Fidas and more Robbies and more you guys would be around to do it. But
Thank
never
you.
give up hope, because hope is the most important part. Hope is the most important equation in peacemaking. Without it, there's no peace.
Thank you, Robbie. I would like to hear from Nafisa, who had wanted to say something. So can we squeeze that in, Fatma? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to make a few notes about what Robbie said and Fida. Like, first of all, the question for Robbie about the woman time. I just want to tell you something, that it's the whole peace agreements which made by men failed, and now I think it's the woman time. It's the woman time to make the whole peace in this world. And I think this is my believers. I believe of woman. Woman can lead. Woman raise the children. Woman raise the whole in our society. The whole influences for the children is woman. Men go and work and do whatever they want to bring the money, but still woman has the influences of men. This is the first important thing in this world. And the second is when Fida, she spoke about the occupation and the war in Gaza and war in the whole country. We've been several wars in this country, and I believe it's not equal. The power, it's not equal, and it's time for women to lead the whole thing. and I believe that in the future we are going to do this kind of this movement, the Palestinian movement, which is like contains the whole woman, as I said. And the thing is, I want to have their own influences for the government. And the thing is, I am in several projects with the Israelis. The unfortunately they don't see us as partners. I think this is not in bad intention, but they are their natural, they because they are occupation, and they and we are occupied. So in these meetings and encounter meetings, I feel that they are treating us as occupation. So it's very important to have the awarenesses of how they are treating us, how in a very simple way, as to have the awarenesses that we are partners. I'm speaking about the peace activists. I'm not speaking about the soldiers, the government, the whole thing, the people, because I believe of people, I believe of population, then I don't believe of leaders. They don't want to have peace. They don't want to keep they want to keep their jobs on. That's why they want to keep the conflict on. That's all. The thing is that the most important for me now is the people themselves. I want the both sides, by the way. I want to educate them how to treat each other, how to think about each other by partners. Now they are not coming there because they are occupation. They came to these organizations and to these projects to make peace. So I faced lots of stories which I left lately. I recently I left one project because of the Israelis women. They treated us as occupation, and it's very bad and very dangerous. So it's very important for me to make this awarenesses in the service. I don't know how to do that, but still, if anybody hear me and want to hear my voice, we need education. We need education for each other, partners. You are not occupation. If you want peace, if you are in the peace organization and want to have partner, so please treat us as partner, not as occupation. That's all.
Thank you very, very much for that, Nafisa. I am so honored and impressed with all of the panelists. You are marvelous women. Thank you. Your work is extraordinary, and especially under the circumstances.
And thank you as well, Nafisa. I'm just grateful for your candor. It adds so much richness to our discussion, and it gives us a lot to consider and to move forward from. I think I would add that, yes, women can have and do need a larger seat at the table, maybe more folding chairs, to use Shirley Chisholm's analogy, to bring to the table. But the most important thing I think right now that women need, in addition to having a seat at the table, is to have men as allies, and to work in partnership to go forward in peace. We are running a few minutes late, but I think at this point I am going to introduce, I believe, is it Sam that is going to be giving it's Aaron that's going to be giving the thank you. Aaron Mills from the Presbyterian Seminary, I always do that, is going to be providing us with the benediction. Aaron, the floor is all yours.
Hey everyone, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today, and I'm representing the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation at Union Presbyterian Seminary. And on behalf of myself and our director, Dr. Rodney Sadler, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. I put our contact information in the comments along with our social media handles, so please feel free to follow us, reach out to me if you want to be on our email list, and we will continue to post about future symposia and events for the center. The prayer I offer this morning is an adaptation of an interfaith universal prayer for peace by Dr. John Heidel. Let us pray. We pause in quiet reflection to lift up this prayer for a peaceful world. In our individual and personal ways, we call upon the Holy One, who sustains our lives and who inspires us to live in community with compassion and kindness and peace. We ask for daily guidance in all of our personal relationships, in our work and play, and in our community involvement, that we might model the possibilities and necessity of peace in everything we say and in everything we do. We pray for wisdom and compassion within the hearts and minds of all world leaders who have the power and the responsibility to make decisions that impact the creation and maintenance of peace. We pray for courage, dedication, and integrity within the spirits of all those who work for peace around the world. We pray for all those who harbor thoughts and feelings of hatred, violence, and greed, that their hearts and minds and souls will be transformed into your likeness of compassion and kindness. We are grateful for the women gathered here today who have generously shared their stories, their pain, their hope, and their wisdom with us. We are thankful for your presence within our lives. May our voices carry prayers of hope, that those who suffer know they are not alone. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That was beautiful and definitely something that we all needed to hear. And I'm going to close out the program by saying I want to thank everyone for being here, for your thoughts, your passions, and your concerns. I want to thank the Union Presbyterian Seminary for all of their support in putting this program together. We couldn't have done it without them. And in particular, I want to thank Dr. Rodney Sadler, who has really been with us all the way on these efforts. We hope we've achieved our purpose to provide you with a variety of women's perspectives so that you and others may connect the dots and identify the commonalities, because that's why we're here. To help us achieve a more just and sustainable peace. We appreciate your presence here, and it matters because your presence matters, and your presence matters because it means you care. So, Lynn?
Yes. Hi, thank you, Fatima. I'm just going to wrap up by saying that if you wish to communicate with either Fatima or myself, Fatima's email is fhargun, FHARGUN, @gmail.com. My email is dvashah, Devasha, @yahoo.com. And please do communicate with us, stay in touch. And I just wanted to recap by saying that this is a 3-part symposium. We had a very interesting question from Victor Friedman as to precisely the style and content of women's difference, how we might frame an approach, a projected treaty or agreement, and a movement to make that happen. So it's a very, very, it's a little teeny seed that we've planted today. And the next 2 symposia are just as crucial and hopefully will grow from this. The next one for women's perspective is visioning what should the settlement between Israel and Palestine look like. And we hope that, this will be really detailed. We hope that we will look at water rights. We hope that we will look at how Palestinians are treated in every facet of Israeli society. We hope that every need on both sides will be treated. And the third is the third in the series is intended to throw around ideas about how to make that happen. Jokingly, a friend of mine, Harvey Wasserman, talked about the Lysistrata method, wherein women would say, "No nookie until you make this peace," worldwide. That could be quite a movement indeed. So we are talking about really trying to create a women's movement based on these ideas. So thank you so much. It was such a privilege and an honor to hear from all three of you. And sorry that Gabi Lasky was not able to join us.
Okay, with that, I'm going to close out the program. And once again, grateful for all of your perspectives and for your presence. And this isn't the last time you'll hear from us. Look out for 2 more. Thank you and have a great day, great evening, whatever it is, wherever you are.